Well, hi, I'm Steve Hall. Thanks for checking out video number 15 in the Veritas series. This is the second video dealing with the evidence of fulfilled prophecy. I hope you've already seen that first one. In the first video about fulfilled prophecy, we considered the words of Isaiah. You remember this? When God said through Isaiah these words, "For I am God, there is no other. I am God, there's none like me," declaring the end from the beginning. That's fulfilled prophecy. And from ancient times things not yet done, saying, "My counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose." So fulfilled prophecy is a powerful evidence that the Bible was not put together by a bunch of men just kind of scheming and putting things together, but by God Himself. There are many, many prophecies in the Bible that were fulfilled hundreds of years after they were originally written down. God had to do that, not men. Today, I want us to look at a prophecy written by a man named Daniel. He wrote these things about 500 years, well, over 500 years before the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem. Daniel, of course, was an amazing man of God. He was taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar, who was a Babylonian emperor, when Nebuchadnezzar captured Jerusalem in 605 BC. Daniel's the one, you may remember, who was willing to stand alone. He stood alone. He knew what was right, rather than participate in idolatry, which is what he would have been doing by eating that defiled food that Nebuchadnezzar offered him. You remember that? That's in Daniel chapter 1. We learn a lot of good things from Daniel. Many years later, Daniel's an old man now, Cyrus of Persia conquered the Babylonian Empire. But Daniel's still around. And now, as an old man, he's the one who refused to stop praying to God. You remember that? And you remember where he wound up? Probably. He wound up in the lion's den. You remember that story. And in his later years, when Daniel's an old man, God gave Daniel some prophecies. Some of them already have been fulfilled. We're going to look at one of those today. Some of them are about the end times. They've not been fulfilled yet. But one of the most amazing of these prophecies is found in Daniel chapter 9, verse 25 and 26. And it reads like this: "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks. The streets shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself." So here's a prophecy about the timing of the crucifixion of Jesus. Did you notice that? After 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And we know, of course, what the words "not for himself" refer to. They refer to the fact that when Jesus died, he did not die for his own sin. He didn't die for his own guilt. He didn't have any sin. He didn't die for himself. He died for us. Now, at first, the rest of that prophecy might seem a little bit mysterious. But he times everything. Do you notice that? From the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem. Now, what's he talking about when he mentions the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem? Well, of course, Nebuchadnezzar had captured Jerusalem when he took Daniel, a very young man, a teenager probably, in 605 BC. But 19 years later, in 586 BC, Zedekiah, and Zedekiah was like a puppet king that Nebuchadnezzar had installed to just administer Jerusalem. Zedekiah very foolishly tried to rebel against Nebuchadnezzar. It was really dumb because Nebuchadnezzar was awesomely powerful. So Nebuchadnezzar just sent in an army to the city and destroyed it. This time he didn't just capture it, he destroyed it. He killed Zedekiah's sons right there in front of Zedekiah, made Zedekiah watch. And then the next thing he did, very cruel, he gouged out Zedekiah's eyes. So the very last thing Zedekiah ever saw was the death of his sons. And then he took Zedekiah captive to Babylon, and Zedekiah stayed there until he died. So Jerusalem was utterly destroyed. Temple was destroyed, the whole thing destroyed. but one day it would be rebuilt. And we can read about that in the Bible, in another book, the book of Nehemiah. And fascinatingly, Nehemiah tells us about this commandment to rebuild Jerusalem that we read about a minute ago in Daniel chapter 9. And we read about it in Nehemiah chapter 2. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. And the king said to me, "Why is your face sad, seeing you're not sick? This is nothing but sadness of the heart." Then I was very much afraid. I said to the king, "Let the king live forever." Standard greeting for the king in those days. "Why should not my face be sad when the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" And he's referring to the destruction under Nebuchadnezzar, under Babylon. Then the king, of course this is the king of Persia, said to me, "What are you requesting?" So I prayed to the God of heaven. Really good move. And I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it." And the king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, "How long will you be gone? And when will you return?" So it pleased the king to send me when I had given him a time. And I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, let letters be given to me, to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through till I come to Judah, and a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress of the temple, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall occupy." And the king granted me what I asked, for the good hand of my God was upon me. Then I came to the governors of the province beyond the river, and gave them the king's letters. And the king had sent with me officers of the army and horsemen. So here we have a description of how the command to rebuild Jerusalem was given in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes. And God has arranged things so there's no doubt as to what that year was. It was 445 BC. And we know that because we know exactly when Artaxerxes' father, Xerxes I, died. And therefore when Artaxerxes came to the throne. Xerxes I died in 465 BC. And we know that because there's a writing on a cuneiform tablet that associates the death of Xerxes with 2 lunar eclipses. And of course, astronomers can use lunar eclipses to pinpoint dates. I mean, God has so fine-tuned his universe, there's no doubt when eclipses took place. We know exactly when they took place. We can time that to the minute. So we know when he died. Now, remember, Daniel gave us some specific timing in this prophecy. He says that from the command to rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah is cut off would be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. In other words, there are 2 segments of time he refers to. 7 weeks and then 62 weeks. Total, 69 weeks. Now, when we hear the word week, we always think of what? 7 days. Yeah. But Bible scholars will tell you that in the Bible, in the Hebrew, the word week can mean week of days, just like we mean week of days, 7 days. But it also can mean a week of years, or 7 years. And as it's used by Daniel here, it obviously means not a week of days, but a week of years, 7 years. So 7 weeks of years would be 7 times 7, or 49 years. And 62 more weeks of years would be 7 times 62, or 434 more years, for a total of 69 weeks of years, or 483 years. Now, in the Bible, a prophetic year was 360 days. That's 12 times 30. 12 months, 30 days per month in the prophetic year. That's clear from passages in Daniel and also in Revelation where we can see things like 3.5 years is the same thing as 42 months, is the same thing as 1,260 days. That reveals to us that we're talking about a prophetic year, which is 360 days. Now, that's a little shorter than our year, a solar year. A solar year, the time it takes the earth to revolve around the sun one time, is 365 and 1/4 days, approximately. So what we have to do is translate the prophetic year into solar years. Well, when we multiply the 69 weeks referred to by Daniel by 360, we get 173,880 days. When you divide those days by the number of days in a solar year, 365.242 to be precise, you get 476 of our solar years. And when you add 476 years to 445 BC, when that command went out to rebuild the city, you get 32 AD. Now you may think that's off by 1 year, but you have to remember that there is no year 0 on the calendar. It's not like a number line. You go from 1 BC immediately to 1 AD. There's no year 0. So that's when Daniel said the Messiah would be cut off, 32 AD. That's a pretty amazing prophecy, don't you think? It's amazing. He did that over 500 years before Jesus was even born. It's one of the many ways God has of saying to us, this is my book. Now you might be wondering, what's that first 7 weeks all about? Well, we really don't know for sure. Probably the best thought is that it took that long for the city to be rebuilt. Well, there are many, many more prophecies in the Bible. We've looked at a few of the prophecies that seem to me pretty powerful evidence. So what do we have? More evidence. This book is a supernatural book. It was not put together by the cleverness of men. It's God's book. So stay in the battle.